Hi, everybody. I'm so glad to see you, and I'm so glad to be here. I'm very honored, and thank you so much, Jan, for including me. My husband, Les, is here too, sitting right down there, and I'm so excited to tell you that today, this very day, September 12th, is our 67th wedding anniversary. And in his honor, I would like to read a poem for Les. You are the one who stood by me. You are the one who gave me the news I did not want to hear. You are the one who held my hand when they wheeled me into surgery. Yours was the first face I saw when I awoke. Yours were the tears that mingled with mine when they removed the bandages. You are the one who never abandoned me to lessen your pain. When I hurt and felt battered, it was your arms that held me. It was your hands that caressed me. It was your eyes that said, you are even more beautiful. You are the one who stood by me through the terror, the pain, the healing, into love. You are the one I cherished more than life itself. My love and gratitude are beyond speaking. Happy anniversary, sweetheart. Now the program says I'm going to talk about fine black lines, poetry as a pathway to healing. So here goes. When I was 16, I wrote, "A poet cannot be brokenhearted." A poet cannot be brokenhearted. When a dear one dies, she writes a requiem. When a lover's untrue, she writes a sonnet. When the world is cruel, she writes satiric verse. A poet can take all the grief from her heart, the pain that can swell and break a heart, and write it in fine black lines on starchy white paper. Oh no, you cannot break a poet's heart. At age 16, I distinctly remember feeling quite pleased with myself, thinking that I had discovered magical powers to triumph over fear and pain. Now I see it was only a shadow of things to come, and I see now, of course, I was wrong. Any heart can be broken. But I also see a grain of truth in the poem. The fine black lines on starchy white paper became a way to cope, to search, to travel toward understanding. Emotional snapshots to deal with intense feelings and moments like this horrible time in 1975. This poem is called Phone Call. I hear her jumbled words, the shriek. My heart turns to stone. I know the fabric of our life is changed from this day on. I hold her in my arms through that long night with passionate desire to protect her from the dawn, from remembering that he is gone. The days, the weeks, the months drag slowly by. It is not right, I cry. My daughter cannot be widowed before I. In 1989, I was diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome, which I've now had for 26 years, and a year later with breast cancer. In my effort to access my inner resources, I fell back on my natural default of writing poems. My oncologist insisted that I, quote, do something with those. So I added journal entries and photographs, and even though I was just a little old piano teacher in tennis shoes, I published Fine Black Lines. Not a definitive book, it's just a book. We all have our stories, and some of yours are much more dramatic than mine. So I simply bring my poems and my books in a spirit of kinship, love, and gratitude, knowing that if we can share together, it is better for all of us. The night before my first mastectomy in 1990, I once again turned to the fine black lines on starchy white paper and I wrote, "Goodbye, beloved breast. I shall never forget you. Shall I ever come to the end of grieving? When first you developed in sweet innocence, I was dismayed. I was afraid of emerging sexuality. But you became beautiful. My lover treasured you. My children nuzzled you and were nourished. I cradled you in my hands to cherish your softness. Now a dark menace has invaded you, and somehow I must bear our parting. Goodbye, beloved breast. Goodbye, beloved part of me. Goodbye, symbol of my femininity." 3 days after the surgery, I saw my chest for the first time and I cried. They were gross, those fine black surgical lines where my soft breast had been. Poems continued to spill out. I'm going to share several of them with you now. The first one is called Good Morning, How Are You? It's best to act normal, to say I'm just fine. What everyone wants is a positive sign. Just smile and say thank you when people will ask. One mustn't let on that each day is a task. Friends keep on calling. You know they mean well, but really they'd rather for you not to tell each symptom, each detail, each worrisome day, or mention that small fear you can't drive away. And illness gets tiring for them and for you. The difference is simple. They get to quit. The next one is Small Amusements. There are some small amusements, though at first they're hard to see, like fluffing up my fiber fill to make it look like me. I have an empty pocket now to store important things, like passports and my credit cards or maybe diamond rings. And there are times I have to smile when people glance my way. They stare and then get flustered, they don't know what to say. And once I had to chuckle as a mirror I passed by. My fluffy was off to the side, its nipple way too high. And exercise can bring a laugh when I go out to trot. One side is jogging with me, the other side is not. There are some small amusements, but I find them rather small, and some days giggles turn to tears, and I can't laugh at all. No lifeguard on duty. It is difficult when one is drowning to wave to the people on shore. One wants to be friendly, of course, but perhaps it is more important to keep swimming. Now we're skipping to the summer of 1991, when I wrote a poem called The Gown. The cloak of denial has slipped from my shoulders. The second breast will go. The long-fought decision has been made. I dress myself in courage and go to the hospital. The second breast is gone. Once more, I gaze downward with tears in my eyes. Once more, the pain and the fear overwhelm me. My courage lies in threads upon the floor. Soon I will gather each fragile fiber and weave it into a mantle of hope. And on the lighter side, a poem called Double Amputee. I have looked this way before, flat-chested, pencil-thin, when I was 10. Strange it is to seem a sexless child again. Too bad about the graying hair and slightly sagging chin. No matter how determined we are that cancer will not change our lives, it does. Some changes are unavoidable, some of them we can choose. Our bodies, our lifestyles, our priorities change. We lose our innocence. I truly walked out of the Garden of Eden for good. Or maybe, just maybe, I walked into it. And somewhere along the line and the way, we can learn to take risks. At our house, we have the cold toast syndrome. We eat the congealed piece of toast while the warm one is getting cold. This is also known as the rotten fruit syndrome. We munch on overripe grapes and smushy bananas while over on the counter, you know what's happening. A diagnosis of cancer jolts one into the realization that life is a major risk. We have to meet those risks. Because if we conserve ourselves and deny life, we take the ultimate risk of someday dying without ever having lived. For me, it is no longer important when I die, but whether I have the courage to truly live in the meanwhile. Those fine black surgical lines represented a risk, of course, and the fine black lines of writing were a risk too, because the words that you commit to a book cannot be recalled. Since the publication of Fine Black Lines, there have been additional opportunities to speak out, to take risks, which brings me to the risk of the fine white lines. The fall that Fine Black Lines was published, an editor from Colorado Woman News interviewed me. Half an hour into the interview, she very timidly asked if they could reprint the mastectomy picture I have in the book to put it on the cover of their October issue of the magazine. Well, one thing led to another, and it all converged on October 1st. The magazine came out that day. Les and I promised that we'd come to their office at 12:30, pick up 6 bundles, take them to the book fair that evening. It turns out that October 1st is also my birthday, and my parents had invited us for cake and ice cream. Picture this, a glorious October afternoon, beautiful flowers and candles, a lovely cake, my elderly parents, my daughter, my sister, and a magazine cover featuring me in glowing color, holding a long-stemmed rose, naked from the waist on up. It was a very interesting birthday party. Months later, I was told that when Colorado Woman News took that issue to be printed, the printer called and said, "I don't think I can print your cover." And they said, "Why ever not?" And he said, "Do you have permission to use that picture?" And they said, "Well, of course." And he said, "Are you sure you have permission? She looks like such a nice lady." Which is precisely the point. I am a nice lady, and nice ladies get cancer. I'm modest and I'm circumspect. And the impact of that picture measures the depth of how important Les and I felt it was for me to do it, having been given that opportunity. They asked me to write a response. This is it. It was difficult to make the decision to put a mastectomy picture in fine black lines, even though Les and I felt it was part of the truth. When we were asked to share another picture, one that was even more explicit and would immediately reach about 60,000 people, we said yes. However, when we saw that picture on the cover of stacks and stacks of magazines, we were stunned. When we could talk again, we reminded ourselves of why we decided to show such a picture. We wanted to do whatever we could to raise awareness. We wanted to show, if we could, that femininity and joy and serenity are not dependent upon body parts. We wanted to do whatever we could to ensure that none of my little piano students would ever have to face breast cancer. Les and I still cringe when we see that cover. I will never, ever feel that naked again. But we're not sorry we did it. And of course, I wrote a poem about that called Cover Girl. We know We agreed to let them photograph my barren chest. We said they could put it on a magazine cover. We saw it as a privilege, a unique opportunity. We thought it wouldn't be so hard. After all, there really is nothing on my chest. It is no different from my back or my arm. But when we first saw that magazine cover, Les wrapped my raincoat around me and carefully tied the sash to cover me completely so that no one could ever again glimpse any of my skin. That was before a woman came to me with tears in her eyes and simply said, "Thank you." The fine black surgical lines focused my life's journey. The fine black lines on starchy white paper both recorded and facilitated that journey, even as they provided a pathway to healing. And the fine white scars have become a reaffirmation of life. The breasts are gone, but I am whole. Disfigurement need not include my soul. Now let me close with the poem that accompanied my naked photo on that magazine cover. It's simply called The Rose. Perception unfolds like the endless petals of an infinite rose. Surely, surely the center is light. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.